I'm Wendy Mitchell from Screen International, and this panel is about the UK's 3D industry, I suppose, and where that is right now. It's in a pretty healthy state, and how do we keep that up for the future, and what are the threats to it, what are the opportunities also. I'm going to let the panelists introduce themselves mostly, and just give us a quick run-through of their jobs, and maybe what their connection to 3D in this context. So we'll start with Alex.
Okay,
Stoltz.
Thanks, Wendy. Yes,
not
Alex
Soltz.
Not Soltz. Yeah, hi everyone. So Alex Soltz. I look after the distribution funding at the BFI, where we back independent, specialised films to take them out to a wider audience in the UK. And yeah, we're looking for films which have audience and breakout appeal. I also work very closely with the production fund. We're all part of one unit at the BFI. But yeah, essentially the job involves growing audiences for film. We've had some experience with 3D. We've backed a few independent 3D projects. In fact, we've backed the first independent release in the UK, which was U2. And we've had really great experiences with Cave of Forgotten Dreams and TT 3D. So we've got some really interesting learnings from those in terms of what audiences like, what they felt about them, and also, what's great about the resources we have at the BFI. We have a research and statistics unit which really sort of crunches a lot of the data in terms of audience trends, industry trends, and that's something we can talk about today.
Great. Samantha next.
So I'm Samantha Perahia. I work for the British Film Commission. So we are the government's strategic agency responsible for maximising and supporting the production of international film and high-end television in the UK. And as well as trying to attract the production into the UK, we work very closely with the UK production infrastructure, help support them and promote them to international filmmakers and TV producers now. And we're also responsible for liaising between the government and the TV and film industry to ensure that policies that the government is bringing in are fit for purpose for the film industry. And very germane at the moment, because we've literally just launched yesterday new tax reliefs for high-end television and animation in the UK. So the British Film Commission will be responsible with industry partners for promoting the new tax relief for TV overseas. And we're already getting a lot of interest. And the way the tax relief works, it's based on activity physically in the UK. It's not based on the nationality of the cast and crew taking part, but it's the point of it is to attract production physically into the UK. So it's particularly interesting new technology being developed, including 3D, because that's where the money will be spent, and that's where the tax relief will be earned, and that's the exact purpose of it. So yeah, it's a very important element for us.
Great. And Dan Simmons.
Hi, I'm Dan Simmons. I'm head of film at Creative Skillset. So we're one of the major funders of today's event. We exist to sort of support the growth of the UK creative industries. We invest in training and education, both for new entrants coming into the industry, but also helping professionals upskill within responding to new technologies, career development. So yeah, we've supported iterations of this event. I mean, this is the first time it's at this sort of scale, but the last couple of years we've worked with Ravensbourne, over a number of years to sort of look at the sort of evolution of 3D and how we can help the industry sort of keep pace, both in terms of technical skills, but also in terms of the creative opportunities presented by 3D. And over the last few years, we've worked with other partners. I think Film at Now has been speaking here today. He sort of came to some of the events we've supported previously, working with Principal Large Format on an event a few years ago, which had a bit of conference with BAFTA around sort of opportunities from 3D, and then some really intense technical training for sort of camera department. So we've done lots of work around sort of with DPs and camera assistants, really helping them understand the technology and the changes there, working with stereographers, etc., sort of helping people to develop their skills. And linked to what Sam does is we're really helping both support the growth of the indigenous industry, but also making sure we've got the skills in place to support and attract inward investment productions into the UK. So yeah, we sort of work on, it's people who work across all kinds of productions, but really making sure that we've got the depth and breadth of crew to sort of support and rise to the challenge of multiple productions. And as, again, Sam was saying, in terms of some exciting opportunities coming ahead now with, inward investment in film in the UK having hit all-time high, sort of 2 years ago, and now new opportunities from high-end TV drama, animation, video games, tax credits. We envisage there's going to be more and more production over the next few years, drawing on this skills base. So what we're doing at the moment is really trying to get detailed sort of forecasting on what the future skills needs are going to be to sort of support this increased level of production, and where we anticipate more and more 3D production, how can we make sure we can support that to the high quality that we've got a reputation for at the moment.
Okay, great. I want to talk about that reputation at the moment to start with. Just sort of looking at the state of the nation of the 3D industry in the UK, it seems to me Sky was a sort of global, worldwide early adopter of 3D, which has helped build an industry more slowly here and some training with that. And then that coupled with what you've been saying about the boom in inward investment and local productions, the film tax credit is very stable and secure, and we're getting a lot of Hollywood shoots here, and other European and from other territories. And also this new high-end TV drama tax credit that was ratified yesterday, or approved yesterday by State Aid,
Europe, that's right.
And animation. It seems like it would be just a really booming time. Is that true? And if it is booming, how do we keep it booming?
Should I take that
Sure,
first?
please.
A lot of it is what Dan's talked about, when we were talking about before, actually. It's a combination of the perception from clients and potential clients. We were talking about a scenario earlier whereby Martin Scorsese's Hugo shot in the UK a couple of years ago, and they bought a lot of their both kit, 3D stereo kit in, as well as crew to actually shoot the film. A lot of that was to do with very long established relationships he has with his DP and his crew around him. But by the end of the shoot, because it was quite extended in the end, one of the UK's lead companies kind of took it on and finished it. So I mean, it's just moving so quickly. So that's something that we're seeing. We were also talking about the fact, in regards to the perception, that a lot of the films that are shooting in the UK using 3D, shooting in 3D, we're looking at a lot of Warner's films, and Warner's obviously have a subsidiary here. They have a huge presence here. They are the biggest investor in inward investment feature in the UK. And we're certainly seeing them already utilising the crew and the technology in the UK. So definitely a job for the British Film Commission to do with partners to ensure that other potential inward investors, other potential studios understand that the level here is high and the capacity is pretty good. Again, we were told by a colleague that there's a kind of 5 levels of high-end crew to service big 3D projects, which I was quite surprised about. So that's definitely something that we have a lot of work to do to demonstrate to our potential international producers, and then working to make sure that capacity is maintained and increased where necessary.
Exactly, but I think the pace at which we've grown is quite, the infrastructure is phenomenal. I think in the last 5 years, the pace at which people have upskilled and sort of got to grips with the new technology and has been outstanding. And so it really is about making sure that's the perception outside of the country as well, that we're saying. So we commissioned some research a few years ago. Olsberg did some research for us looking at the perception of our skills, predominantly from North America. And it's really sort of going, actually, where are the mismatches? Where are the sort of actual skills gaps, and where is it perception issues that we need to do some real communications around to say, actually, we've got fantastic people here. We've built up this sort of expertise and experience and the infrastructure, and so if you come in now, you're really building on the sort of the base that the strong foundations. So I think that's the big job that we're sort of saying, in partnership, with all the agencies that we work with, we need to make sure we get those messages lined up. That where there are real skills gaps, we respond to that, and where it's misperceptions, we get the effective messaging out to make sure that people keep choosing the UK as their first destination of choice.
I think the other key thing for the new tax reliefs, especially high-end TV one in particular, we have a very buoyant film production infrastructure, and it's very known around London and South East with the studio cluster. But with TV, I mean, you look at somewhere like Belfast, where they're on the 3rd season, or they might be embarking on their 4th season of Game of Thrones out there, which is a massive HBO show, pretty much entirely shot there and maintained there. And the crew that has increased there, as a result of it, Da Vinci's Demons, which is a Starz BBC Worldwide co-production, huge again, it's just about to be launched at MIP TV next week, shot entirely in an old Ford factory in Swansea. Again, I've been told that the indigenous crew accounts for about 75% of that minimum of 75%. They've brought down the VFX infrastructure, and they're doing it all out of this factory. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that with the high-end drama. They don't necessarily demand the Pinewoods and the Elstrees, though we certainly will be encouraging there as well. But that's the thing you're going to have to look about, and we're working very closely with Creative Skillset to ensure that it's a full spread throughout the UK, not just in the traditional studio clusters in the South East.
I think that's critical, isn't it? That the ambition of the tax credit is that it's really stimulating high levels of production across the UK, and so the model of Game of Thrones, of seeing what that's done for the local industry, everyone's eagerly looking at and going, okay, well, how, if we get that kind of equivalent locally, how do we very rapidly make sure we've got the skills base to resource that, in terms of facilities, infrastructure and people? That's the problem some of the colleagues in the nations and regions often face, that people hit a certain point in your career and then you go, I'm off to London, I'm going to the studios or something, I'm going abroad. So it's kind of, how do we, with now increased opportunities to work and stay local, how do we make sure that we build that skills base? And what we're doing is, everything, as I say, we work through from, new entrants up to professional development. So how do we work with our the film academies, the media academies that we work with, to make sure that new people coming through are sort of understanding the opportunities and the potential there, and sort of building that into their education, so that they sort of, from creative perspective or technical perspective, whatever their route, they understand the opportunities presented and are ready to hit entry-level jobs working on 3D productions.
How much of the success to date is based on government support versus private companies like Sky or Vision 3, starting and being active and employing people to do this work? What does that private-public mix need to look like for success here?
I think the mantra that I always use in regards to the tax reliefs, they put us on a level playing field there or thereabouts. Not quite there at the moment, but so with the tax relief, with a beneficial dollar to pound exchange rate, with that level playing field, people want to come here because of the infrastructure. And then the UK has got a fantastic tradition of rising to the occasion. I mean, as Dan said, 2011, we're at about £1.2 billion worth of just US production physically in the UK, straight into the UK economy. Film industry employs around about 44,000 people. So it's a huge industry. And we do have, you were talking about people having to move to London to go to the industry. What we're seeing now is people moving back to Northern Ireland and Wales. And I think that pays testament to the UK industry, that they will, if you build it, they will come. And I think that we will see that moving pretty quickly with the TV drama. It's obviously the exchange rate will have an effect on it, but that's great at the moment. $1.50 to the pound. We're in pretty good shape, fingers crossed.
I think in terms of the skills base, I think there's been a lot of, we've done some sort of really successful interventions to sort of train people, but I think there's a lot of, what the feedback we've been getting as well is just sort of saying people need to learn by doing. It's kind of what Anne was saying yesterday. Yeah. You learn by doing. You need to do this stuff. So what we're looking at moving forwards as well is how do we just help to harness a lot of what's happening. We don't need to do always sort of like lots of really intense separate training. It's sort of going, how can we work with manufacturers and suppliers and work with production shooting in 3D and go, how can we harness the learning from that and transfer that? So whether that's sort of getting people to are there opportunities for people to shadow on set, or sort of do little case studies afterwards that say what were the 5 things that you learned on that you wish you'd known beforehand, and how can we just put that out there? And that's something we're just looking to do across everything actually. In an industry which is sort of it's so fast moving and every production's different from the last one, how can we just sort of gather some of that learning and get it out there very rapidly, very easily? That doesn't all have to be high cost training. That's got a place as well, but some of it is just about raising the playing field and giving everyone sort of equitable access to the learning from the productions that are happening, because it is the pace of technological change, the sort of pace at which we're sort of creatively getting, sort of developing a more sophisticated sort of sense of what we can do with this. It's sort of just trying to share that.
And the key to the public funding is, I think, the sustainability. So if you look at a franchise like Harry Potter, where Warner Brothers invested hundreds of millions of pounds in the UK, so there's your private income. With obviously you've got the tax relief, which was worth up to 16% of what they spent in the UK, so there's their investment. But what that allowed every single part of the industry to do, the 4 biggest VFX houses in the UK, MPC, DNIC, Cinesite, Framestore, all worked on Harry Potter, and with that sustained business they were able to invest in research and development and extend and expand, and we're seeing the exact same thing happening in 3D. And now with the TV high-end drama as well, we demonstrated the loss of production from the UK because of costs, and we demonstrated the not getting the inward investment that we were in film because of the tax relief. And the government looked at it and they saw that it made sense. So I think hopefully we should see the same thing happening now in high-end TV drama and animation. And when the games one comes in as well, I mean that's got all sorts of possibilities for 3D.
So, yeah, totally.
You mentioned public funding, so I'm going to turn to Alex as the representative from, I guess it is the nation's public body for film now?
The lead body,
yes.
I think is the official term.
In the forward plan, there was a lot of talk about new technologies and engaging with audiences in new ways, and I don't remember seeing, there's no specifics that I remember about 3D, and certainly you wouldn't want to say, we're going to have a quota, we need to do 20% of 3D films. But what is the BFI stance on working with 3D, and especially indigenous 3D?
Sure. Well, I mean, obviously we work very closely with our partners, Skillset and BFC, on those sorts of industry and training matters. I mean, in terms of production and distribution, we don't have a 3D policy per se. What we're looking for is great storytelling, great audience potential, and very open, very receptive to projects which deliver that through creative use of 3D.
Okay, and are there 3D projects in the pipeline that are being funded by the Film Fund?
Not at the moment.
But have been and will be.
Exactly. I mean, have been. I mean, we as I said, we've done a number through a distribution fund. We're not actively going out and seeking out 3D projects.
Right.
So, I mean, one of the priorities in the plan was very much about family films. But actually, the research, that's intuitively you might think that's actually, well, that could be a great opportunity for 3D. The research we've done actually suggests that the family audience are a little bit iffy about 3D at the moment.
Maybe you can talk us through just a few of what works in 3D here in audiences.
No, some interesting trends there. I mean, we looked at films which are available in 3D and 2D, which is pretty much all 3D releases have a 2D component, and then looked at where the money was taken, in the 2D screens, in the 3D screens, and then averaged it out so you can sort of see, which screens are more popular. And yeah, very interesting trends emerging. The least 10 or the 10 lowest performing in terms of 3D choice, so where audiences are actively choosing 2D, were all family films. Big family films as well. Madagascar was in there, Brave. These are, they still took quite a lot of money in 3D. I mean, and a lot of money overall. But audiences were, on a sort of 4-to-1 ratio, choosing to do 2D. Now, you can sort of we don't have the research to say why that's happening, but you can speculate. It's probably about the expense. It's probably about perceptions of kids' glasses, or and that sort of hassle. I think there's also something about how the industry messages 3D. I think that's I'm sure that's talked about yesterday on the cinema panel. The films which really work are films where the 3D is front and center. It's part of the production, distribution, and exhibition strategy. So you got, it's part of, key part of the production vision for the film. Distribution, it's the film in 3D. Like Life of Pi, what a great example of how Fox, marketed that almost exclusively as a 3D film. It was integral to it, and then that filters through to exhibition. Whereas so I think and the other films which worked, so Life of Pi worked really well. People were choosing 3D. Other auteur-driven stuff, Hugo, Tintin. These were all films where people were, actively choosing 3D, and genre stuff as well, more action, horror material as well. So I think audiences are getting, are getting savvy now. I think they definitely were at a point of, which is really exciting. We're sort of point of, maturity or, early middle age for the medium. Audiences now, probably been burnt a few times of, on substandard products, and now they, they're a bit more selective, a bit more discerning about, and they can sort of smell if it's just like, I'm just going to use Madagascar here, Madagascar 3, and then at the bottom it's like also available in, in Real D or whatever. I mean, I think audiences are becoming more savvy, and so we've got to, as an industry, think, more kind of in a unified way about it.
And how can that fit in with what the BFI wants to do with audience development and fostering new audiences in the UK? And I mean, do you start with 4-year-olds and get them in glasses, and then they grow up loving 3D? Or?
Yeah, I mean, potentially. I mean, I think that's, I think it's got to be delivering a great experience, particularly for those, early on, and that's, I think it's, it's the same. It's the same trends. It's the same, pattern. What do audiences look for in a film? It's the story. It's and it's the experience, particularly when they go to the cinema. And that's what, and that's really what we want to deliver. The BFI, in terms of the films we back, great stories and great examples of that. So, but I think, for the kids, I mean, do we want to get them into cinema, or do we want to get them into 3D cinema? I mean, it's get them into cinema, and expose them to the widest range of stuff possible.
But we were saying earlier as well, I think, as the technology gets more and more sophisticated, we're sort of saying the glasses are this sort of block for lots of people at the moment, and that actually, when we start reaching the point where it's, more, better designed, more comfortable glasses, or if we reach a point where you haven't got to have glasses, then I think all these sort of things will radically game change the sort of, uptake.
What about TV, 3D TVs at home? Do you think that's actually going to make a difference anytime soon? And could that hurt 3D cinema?
Well, I mean, it's, it needs to come in terms of the sustainability of the industry, in terms, you can't just have stuff performing theatrically and then just drop away. So it does need to come. I think cinema, 3D was a huge boost for cinema. It completely changed the landscape. It was the driving factor for digitisation. Before Avatar, you can just see the spike. When Avatar came, everyone digitised, started the digitisation process. So it's been great for cinema. It has been a point of differentiation. Has cinema made the most of that? Probably not. But nevertheless, it's been a huge boost. But it's coming, and so I think cinema again will need to sort of step up again. In terms of the experience it offers, the differentiation between that and the home. But it's overall, it's got to be a positive thing for the industry and the sustainability of the industry.
And I think one of the things is, again, much as a lot of what we've been doing around 3D is around the production side. Again, what we're looking is how can we work again with sort of exhibition distribution to support new skills in terms of marketing and audience development, and how are you sort of finding better ways to communicate. There's all kinds of interesting developments. There's the new subtitling sort of glass demonstrations the CA did the other day. There's sort of all the, the object-based sound, all these innovations in sort of exhibition that you sort of go, how are we making sure that we're really clearly communicating to audiences the enhancements, the very huge innovations that are happening in terms of exhibition that make that experience different, unique, and improved. That will help, hopefully sort of get people coming back to theatres. I think that's sort of something that we haven't historically always been great at. That, as you say, sometimes it's whether that was that a conscious marketing decision, they weren't pushing the 3D so heavily, or was it just they thought people would go for it? It'd be interesting to understand a bit more about that, and how do we make sure that we support people to really think through their marketing campaigns, not just about specific films, but about the theatrical experience.
We were mentioning that sort of joined up thinking across the industry. What do different sectors of the industry need to do to communicate better about this? Is that impossible, or do people just need to start talking with each other in a different way?
It's interesting. I mean, we tried, I think there probably needs to be better cross-sector communication. I mean, we tried to do something with the Independent Cinema Office a few years ago. We funded something to actually encourage that sort of more, how do you get sort of more joined up collaboration around marketing. And it was really hard to get people in a room and talk about it, so I think actually it was maybe slightly ahead of its time. But, it's one of the things we know it needs to happen, but, it's just trying to find the way to make it happen. So I think, I think that is probably critical.
I mean, events like this are a great start, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely, but recognising that sort of, marketing starts from, especially, with all the sort of social media around sort of, around projects and films, it's sort of how do you start thinking about that from conception, so you're thinking for the whole life cycle of a film. When do you start sort of engaging with people, building your audience, getting people aware of the opportunities? So I think there's we need to we're catching up, we're sort of rapidly learning but still catching up with the sort of opportunities in terms of engaging with audiences and sort of making people aware of the potential.
Right, and no sector is perfect, so I was going to see what you thought could be improved about 3D side of the industry in the UK. Do we need more specific training? Do we need apprenticeships? Do we need a 3D only tax break? Do we need a special pot of funding? What would be sort of the blue sky of what would be great to keep the UK at or near the top of this industry?
From a skills perspective, I think, as I say, we're just going out to consult with people again at the moment to sort of do some more granular forecasting around the, what productions do we anticipate are coming. With this, in high-end TV, there's a projection of there's still around 350 million pounds of new production activity in the UK. So, we anticipate quite a bit of that could be in 3D. So what does that practically mean in terms of numbers of people that we need? So we're just sort of mapping, getting that detail of numbers, and I think then that for sure we anticipate there will be sort of need to make sure you've got from new entrants upwards, sort of new people coming in who can, as I say, hit the ground running. Because we did a project a few years ago with the Guild of British Camera Technicians and Turning Point to train camera assistants and give them practical work experience on 3D shoots. But how do we make sure in the future that new people coming in have built that into their training and education, that they've got some of that experience from the outset? So I think, there's a need for new entrants who can, this is part of their core understanding, this is just one of their tools in their toolkit. As I say, I think it's about really sharing the learning so that we get better at really helping people. The learning that comes from each production, how can we sort of get people in that sort of sense of, bit of reciprocity. If you give out, you'll get learning back in, tenfold, hopefully. So, but in terms of the specific numbers from a skills perspective, we're working through some of that. But I think we expect there'll be growth. Well, there will be growth in production. We expect there'll be growth in 3D production. And how do we make sure we keep pace with that? Are
there enough people to train those new entrants yet?
I mean, that is a challenge that often the experts are busy working. So that's the challenge. Sort of, we'll be looking at, we work with international partners. So there's media, obviously the European Funding Agency, the Irish Film Board, all of whom have been doing stuff around 3D as well. So looking at how do we really, not think that we have to do it all ourselves as well, but if there's excellent training happening elsewhere, how do we either, package that and bring it into the UK or send people to go on that internationally? But it is a challenge, when there's only a limited number of professionals who can do this stuff to get their time. It's tough.
And staying ahead, I guess, of the technology curve as well, with formats changing several times during one film shoot.
Yeah. What's exciting about
train people on something is
exactly.
difficult.
What's exciting about this conference as well, they've got the research strand for the first time, which is really exciting, thinking how do we really try and keep pace, forecast better where this is going, and it's just moving so quickly. It's very difficult, but what can we preempt? What can we start working on that sort of looks at where the technology is going? It's from a sort of from that conceptual level, how do we keep pace with the changes? And as you say, then how do we think about the different ways we can upskill people? So there's not as much downtime on a shoot, but how do you sort of can there be stuff that's on the job learning rather than having to go on a course? So that you sort of build in that kind of mentoring and support and development on an ongoing basis, rather than people having to take the time out to do a training course.
For the British Film Commission, it's going to be a massive learning curve, because there hasn't been, obviously we've got an amazing Indigenous TV drama industry, but in regards to things like Game of Thrones and Da Vinci's Demons, the fact that I can name the two biggest ones is very significant. So for us, we're going to have to see a lot of it. We're starting to get some inquiries in from very big, similar-sized companies for big series. And it will be a steep learning curve, and we'll be thinking on our feet and making sure that we're being supremely joined up, that, to the point where we're speaking to our clients and potential clients to say, they can bring people in, that if there is a skill shortage in the UK, we're not going to stop them from coming in. They'll have to supplement it with international crew, and obviously our aim is to minimise that. They don't want to spend the money of having to bring in international crew and per diem them and spend them, and we don't. We want our Indigenous crew to be able to rise to the challenge. But it's going to be a constant dialogue between everybody that works in this infrastructure to see what's coming, and quickly.
Right.
And literally just kicked off yesterday. So, it doesn't even have royal assent yet, but people could start incurring costs to go towards the tax relief. So it was literally from yesterday that they pressed the go button, and from this moment on, we're going to see where we are.
And the exciting thing, we over the last couple of months we've successfully sort of secured some funding from the Treasury to invest in skills. So, around recognising the likely sort of increase in production because of the new tax credits. So the Treasury has invested £16 million in us over the next few years, which is amazing, to really sort of go, how do we make sure that we keep pace and sort of with this, the new skills that are needed to invest in that. So we've actually got money, which is brilliant. So, we can actually really do something about it. So it's just sort of, as I say, getting to that granular level of detail across animation and TV and games to sort of go, how do we work over the next few years to sort of really upskill the industry and make sure, we don't end up with productions either bringing in loads of overseas crew or worst case, someone doesn't come here because they feel that we couldn't resource it effectively.
Right. And just to give some context to this, if it sounds like to the audience, why we're in the middle of a recession, why are they chucking £16 million into creative skill set, why are they investing in tax reliefs? The film tax relief has been a fantastic model. For every £1 it's cost the Treasury, it's brought £12 minimum in to the UK economy. So it was just a bit of a no-brainer, really.
Yeah, that says enough. And Alex, in terms of distribution and exhibition, is the infrastructure here to have enough 3D screens? Are there any barriers that need to be removed there?
No, I think we're good on that front. There's we're basically 100% digitization. Majority of those will have 3D capability. There is there's a potentially a small issue about some smaller cinemas who haven't been able to convert. That's something we're still looking at. But no, on the big picture, it's the infrastructure's there. I think let's go back to it. It's an opportunity for the industry to sort of what would be in an ideal world would be to have a brand for 3D which everyone buys into. That's probably pie in the sky thinking, but at least a sort of agreement in principle that sort of the maybe not as defined as a brand, but what's good about 3D and the messaging that the whole industry conveys to consumers about it. That I think is an opportunity which hasn't been fully grasped. It has on certain films, but not across the board.
Right. And this won't apply to the films that Sam works on, but there is a feeling there is a barrier to entry because it's really expensive, or it's more expensive, and you can't shoot a 3D film on your iPhone, and if you're a kid who wants to be a filmmaker, you can't go play around. So for filmmakers in this country, you know, how much cheaper do things need to get? Does the kit, the equipment, the editing, all of it, it just seems a little bit out of reach for a lot of people. Do we think that's going to change? Does it have to change?
Yeah, I mean,
Or we'll just let the Hollywood guys
it is
take
becoming more, you know, I think over time it will become more affordable. So I think, you know, you are seeing some, a lot of people sort of looking at the business model and sort of going, you know, actually, again, with the increased opportunity for recruitment at the other side, you sort of go, actually, if you can make it for the right kind of cost, it could work. So I think there's some really interesting, we're working with education partners. There's, I mean, this is VFX specifically rather than 3D, but we're doing a really interesting project working with some, it's a sort of cross-channel sort of Franco-Anglo sort of collaboration, looking at, you know, looking at visual effects and the application of visual effects on low-budget shoots, and sort of going, actually, how can you sort of combine, so it's academic research, then sort of, so you do the theory, and then you sort of do the practical application with low-budget shoots. And I think that kind of model for 3D would be really interesting. How do we get a kind of R&D base going, sort of, you know, what would need to happen to make this really work on a sort of like, you know, indigenous basis, on a sort of more cost-effective basis. So I think that model that we're doing on the visual effects side is something we'd be looking to sort of see how can we do some further R&D, test this, see what kind of scope and scale you need, what costs you need this to come down to sort of be able to make this work practically.
I mean, it is hardware reliant, isn't it? I mean, that's because in VFX we've had some amazing innovations from people like Gareth Edwards on the film Monsters, who, you know, did it in his bedroom, and so you kind of, you know, you're looking for that sort of innovation, that sort of hacking kind of mentality to sort of push things a bit forward. With hardware, that's going to be a bit harder than innovating with software, I guess. But yeah, you know, it will come. It will drive, as long as the demand is still there, as long as we continue to, you know, treasure it as a, you know, this sort of, you know, fantastic new tool, a new storytelling tool, which I think is the way to look at it. I think that's, you know, what Ang Lee talked about yesterday.
Great. I was going to see if anybody in the audience had a question for our panel. We've got a lady right up here in the second row, please.
I'm not used to using a microphone. I was just going to ask whether there's any news on the trade agreement that's being organized between the U.S. and the EU countries, and how that will affect cultural aspects. Have you any information on that?
I don't know anything about it. I mean, there certainly isn't a co-production agreement between the US and Europe. It's never needed to be.
Sorry, general trade agreement.
I'm afraid I'm completely ignorant of it.
I am.
I'm afraid.
Me too.
Sorry.
Would you like to come up here?
That's good, thanks. That's the answer anyway.
I think there's another question back there, and then over here.
Hi, Ivor Benjamin, Directors Guild. This has been a very interesting talk. I'm sorry I came in a little late. There is, we're aware in the Guild of a sort of disjunct between the aspirations of directors, particularly young directors, to get their hands on even low-level VFX and on 3D, and the actual ability to do that. Seems to me that there's a way to go here if we're going to get a creative push rather than a simply technical push in 3D. Okay, so any comments there?
Yeah, I mean, I can well imagine that's the scenario, and I can imagine also that people aspiring to make 3D films are often sort of pushed or pigeonholed into, you know, what people might think of the predictable genres for those, you know, for 3D films as well, which could be an issue, like Ang Lee was saying yesterday. You know, the capacity for the medium for drama and, you know, emotion and, you know, stillness. but yes, and that clearly seems to be, it goes back to that cost of uptake or cost of entry issue, I guess.
Yeah. And as we're saying, sort of, I think it's also just about disseminating some of the information better, raising awareness of what works, breaking some of those myths around it being sort of traditional genre. I think the list you were saying, Alex, about actually what's worked, what's been successful, I think is really interesting. Just that more people can see, actually people are really interested in engaging with auteur-driven stuff. That sort of, it's not just all about big bangs and explosions and things flying out the screen at you. So I think really trying to educate the industry on what works, and then find ways to, if we can find shared ways of experimenting, providing a sort of R&D space where people can test stuff. I think that would be a really exciting development.
Okay, thanks. There just one thing to add there. That there's been a little bit of research, and I need to track it down again, on how an audience's perception of faces in 3D is more psychologically attractive, it's more psychologically attached than when we've got to reinterpret 2D up to 3D in your brain. So that's quite an interesting move for straight drama and particularly television.
Yeah, I think Ang Lee did say yesterday that the 3D tests showed a more realism than 2D, and going back and forth, and how we've traditionally been, audiences have been reading that. Final question over here.
Hi. At the screenwriting level, what do you think is the difference between writing with a 3D project in mind or with a 2D project in mind? Thank you.
I guess from what we were speaking to Adam from Vision 3, who's been very involved in this process, and he was talking about something like The Great Gatsby, where, and just what you were saying about the faces being mapped and so forth, the emotion that can be portrayed. I guess if you're writing with that in mind, rather than I'm still guilty of it, thinking in action genre when I think of 3D. I mean, even though I saw Life of Pi and that kind of changed things for me, but yeah, just talking about the depth of emotion and being able to experience it much more as an audience member. If you're talking about writing in that genre, that would probably open all sorts of opportunities for one. I have absolutely no writing skill whatsoever, but I'd be interested in seeing something like that.
Thank you.
Alex, from scripts that BFI gets in, are there some, do you see people trying to write in a different way for 3D and 2D?
I mean, yeah, I mean, there's obviously, this obviously is taken into account by the writer in those specific, but we're not really getting a lot in.
No.
Not really getting a lot in.
Okay.
No. But again, I think it will take a while for this to seep through. I think it's a sort of it's been a few years, and I think in another few years there'll be a different mindset in the industry. I think it will have embedded, will have seen more successes. As Adam was saying earlier, and it's like every time some you have one big success or something happens, everyone leapfrogs ahead and sort of goes, okay, so you could do that. So then it'll take another few years before that idea translates to another film on screen. So I think, but I think in 10 years' time we'll be in a very different place altogether.
Hopefully there's like an 11-year-old future James Cameron.
Yeah, exactly. Someone's been
inspired
now, hugely, and their vision is going to come to the screen in a few years' time, and the technology available to them, all that kind of stuff, will just suddenly, be game-changing.
I think Gatsby will be interesting because it is, I mean, even Life of Pi, it's a fantasy film, it still can, use that. Whereas Gatsby is realism, and I certainly haven't seen a genre like that with 3D, so I'm quite looking forward to seeing how it's used in that capacity.
Absolutely.
Though it's Baz Luhrmann, so it's kind of still a big...
Yeah, it's going to be a show.
Not exactly reality.
No,
we want Mike Lee to make a...
Well, he's just starting shooting, isn't he?
Okay. Actually, Turner could come to life with 3D.
Nice.
Well,
So we'll meet back here in 5 years from Mike Lee's 3D debut.
Yeah.
I think we're out of time, so thank you to the panel for some great